Sveiki atvykę į sekmadienio varietę su Laurynu Širvydžiu. Sveiki, gyvi. Šiandieną, kaip jau ir žadėjau, yra speciali sekmadienio varietė su Laurynu Širvydžiu laida, kurią netgi ir atskirai sunumeruosiu. Ir tai yra interviu su istoriku, su kolega Eriku Godliauskas, kuris mums papasakoja šiame interviu apie Bolsonaro, apie kaip atsirado šitas režimas, apie COVID-19, tai yra koronavirusą ir situaciją Brazilijai, bei apie jo šviežiai išleistas kelias knygas ir daugiau informacijos apie buvusius interviu ir apie tai, kur galima įsigyti Eriko knygų, rasite nuorodose prie aprašymo. Taigi, malonaus klausimo. Beje, interviu anglų kalba aš darau keistą prielaidą, kad jūs ją daugiau mažiau suprantate. Skanaus. Hello, today for the first interview ever for my podcast, I will be talking to Erick Godliauskas, who is a fellow historian. So, Erick, you have finished your PhD studies in 2012 in São Paulo University. You had a couple of postdocs in University of Columbia in Brazil. And as I understand, you also teach at a university in Brazil. And from what I find in your social networks, I believe that you are also a fan of American football. Is it a fair description, or is there something I missed?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a fair description. Yes. Well, when I was studying at Columbia University, I went to an American football game, and it's a fantastic show. So then I enjoy, but I also love soccer as much as a Brazilian.
As all people from Brazil do. So in 2015 we already had an interview, and you also had an interview with Jair, a friend of mine as well, for journal IQ, I believe, and we will link the articles in the description. And this time I have just 3 general topics: the Bolsonaro regime, COVID-19 in Brazil, and your new books. As you are based in Brazil, it is of course very interesting for me to talk about your local politics. In Europe, we sort of know about this very strange and very right-wing president of yours, Jair Bolsonaro. And what I would like to ask you is, how did he get into power? Some of my listeners might be aware of recent political turmoil following the presidencies of Lula da Silva and her successor, and his successor, Dilma Rousseff. Some of my listeners might also be aware of an acclaimed Netflix documentary, The Edge of Democracy, which basically portrays the events as a legal coup d'etat when Dilma Rousseff was impeached in 2016. So maybe you would like to explain what is the social context of these events. How did Bolsonaro get into power? Where does his support come from?
Well, I think his support came from different parts of and different social class. I think it's not one group, but different groups that join against the left wing, against the Work Party, against Lula. So it was a coalition of forces against something, and not exactly to introduce or to organize a new project, a new national project. That's why the situation now is so confusing, because too many groups together, that the only project was to be against something. When they have to organize a government, they are unable to do. So what happened is that Lula period was very interesting if you think about economy and social issues. But when the crisis came, when Dilma was in the government, then the Work Party didn't know exactly how to answer to this crisis. And different right-wing groups that always exist in Brazil, they organize better, they improve better. They also had some support from right-wing in Europe and right-wing in the United States, and they improved the way that they were organized themselves. And then when Lula was arrested and finally he chose a person that was not able to organize properly an election, a campaign, so Bolsonaro won. And also I think the fact that he was stabbed with a knife during his campaign was giving him the idea that he is a kind of national hero fighting against the communism and the left wing and against the corruption, something like that. So, but if you look carefully, you're gonna see a group that is very right wing, very conservative, a group of evangelicals, and also a group of neoliberals that are inside this government now. The neoliberals is represented by Paulo Guedes, that is the minister that rules the economy issues. You're gonna see many other ministers that they are very conservative in their positions, and a group that is this radical right wing, very crazy right wing that believes in all conspiracy theories that you can imagine, like Steve Bannon in United States, something like that.
Okay, but you have mentioned that evangelicals in Brazil support the Bolsonaro regime. And what about, as far as I understand, Brazil is in generally very Catholic country and society. So do evangelicals there feel sort of like a minority, and maybe they find their way of expression of their, I don't know, social beliefs?
Catholics were a majority until the 80s and 90s. The fact is that evangelicals are growing and growing very, very fast. The evangelical movement is astonishing growing, and it's a movement that has some connection to the United States also. So American evangelists Brazilian evangelists used to go to the United States and learn how to do things, how to organize, and then they come. And also they have power because they have a TV station. They have radios and things like that, and many churches all around. So if you go, for example, around my city, you're gonna find different evangelical organizations all around. So they are growing, astonishingly growing.
These so should I understand that some of these organizations are basically based from the United States? Because I know that lots of evangelicals do this sort of conversion work in like third world countries, in Africa, etc. Are these evangelical groups more like an import from the United States, or are these sort of natively grown organizations?
I think they are native grown, but they are inspired in the United States how to use the media and how to use TVs, the radios, and all these things in order to mobilize.
So you have lots of like mega churches, those like very big, very sort of, you know the concept of a mega church from the United States.
Yeah.
So are these similar?
Yeah, quite similar. I think it's difficult to explain it because when you look carefully, it came very the poor part of the society. So they were able to organize these people, just parts of society that no one were able to organize previously. So they we can say that they are the church of the poor people, and most kinds they are replacing African religions that previous dominate these areas. So something like this, it's quite complicated because it's not a middle class or upper classes. It's just very,
universal.
Poor people, very poor people organization.
Okay. Also, from what I have already read about Bolsonaro, is that he started as a sort of I don't know, very right-wing figure with sort of, I don't know, aspirations to recreate the times of the military regime. I can't remember when it ended in Brazil, I think in the 80s. But during the elections, that he basically moved from sort of a very socially conservative right-wing organization into sort of liberal sphere. So do liberals in Brazil support Bolsonaro?
Okay, so Bolsonaro, he came from the army. It was his first step was in the army, and we have in Brazil something that is a saudosist feeling about a military regime. So we have people that believe that military regime was a good moment in our history, and they have these nostalgic feelings about this history moment. And it's quite astonishing because it was a very difficult period with torture and prisons and full of political prisoners and so on. But they always use this authoritarian period against the democracy. What happened is that Bolsonaro used this saudosistic feeling very much against the democracy, and is still using this saudosistic feeling against the democracy, against institutions. The liberalism in Latin America is not opposed to authoritarianism. Just if we think about Chile example, so we have Pinochet, that was a very authoritarian and a dictator, but his economic points were based on Chicago boys approach. So it was very neoliberal in economy and very authoritarian in the way to manage the state. So for many neoliberals in Brazil to join authoritarian government is not exactly a problem. Not for all. Okay, so a part of liberals, they are okay with some kind of authoritarianism to introduce their ideas. And Paulo Guedes, that is the minister, he represents very well this kind of neoliberal that is, it's okay to live with some saudosist feelings about dictators. So Paulo Guedes was never worked on the state, never worked in any administration. He was a banker. So his own project is to destroy the welfare state. His own project is privatization and so on. So his idea is if we sell everything, that we're going to be better. So to sell everything in Brazil and to reduce the social support, you have to have an authoritarian state because people are going to react. So it's not a contradiction in this sense.
Okay, there is, of course, slightly, of course, a different context. Now, I just want to get back to the period before Bolsonaro in power. Well, the Workers' Party, the party which supported Lula da Silva, was in power for, well, more than a decade. And It had some obvious successes with renta basica. I don't know how do you call it, with these direct payments to the poorest people, and Brazil had successes with getting the most vulnerable people out of danger of poverty. But there is another part. Do these corruption scandals in Brazilian oil sector, were those scandals merited? Was the Workers' Party corrupted in any way, or were these blown out of all proportions?
I think the work party, it's kind of difficult to explain, because the work party, in one moment, in order to approve all the projects that you mentioned, had to mobilize or negotiate with all the oligarchy, and that is very corrupt. So if they are not themselves corrupt, the work party, if Lula is not himself corrupt, he obviously managed all the corruption around him. He knows that what was happening. He knew what was happening. And the corruption is always part of our administration. It's always part of our society, very unfortunately, I would say. And but it's not something that we can normalize. It's something very difficult to live with. And I think Lula, he was unable to fix these issues. And to be honest, he was very comfortable managed with the old oligarchy, and he thought that he could do this, and Dilma Rousseff also doing these kinds of negotiation. I think also Lula gives some steps forward too fast. For instance, when Brazil tried to organize the Olympic Games and also the football World Cup. So it's very expensive things that is too much money and too much corruption all around. So we spend too much money with unuseful things when the society is still very poor, because this kind of programs, social programs, they are just to help support people to not starving. But does not change the society. They're still very poor. They're still very dependent. They still need the state support. So Lula didn't change the society. He accommodates the situation with little distribution and many, how can I say that? And be comfortable with the old oligarchy. So the society did not change.
So Lula and Rousseff, in many ways, they made the deal with the old elite that the Workers' Party and Lula himself will basically do a little bit of redistribution among the edges of the entire process, but will leave the oligarchy intact. Is that?
Yeah. I would say that the elite got even richer, more money than they had previously.
Okay. The next thing is actually another thing that I don't know, my listeners might know or have noticed at some point. The Bolsonaro family. I remember this that he has a very interesting son, and the other thing, his retinue, the people that surround him, are these people from mafia? Because I remember this message that after a G20 summit in Spain, a Spanish police caught one of the people in his entourage with cocaine. Is it a typical behavior for Bolsonaro regime? Is this a trend, or was it just a one-off?
Well, this is very, very complicated issues because it's under investigation, and the accusation is that, or the suspicion, or what the left wing is saying, is that Bolsonaro's sons and he was connected to what we call militias. Militia was a kind of security, a kind of armed organization organized by police, army, and other kinds of workers that work in security part of the state that organize themselves as a mafia. And then they put out, you have the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, so they banish all the drug dealers and take the favelas for themselves. No, it's difficult to understand, but imagine that you have a very poor neighbor, and this neighbor is like a drug dealer, the owner of this place. They own everything. So then you have people from army, from police, and other security parts. They join in an organization, clandestine organization, fight the drug dealers, put them out, and then assume this area and made business in this area. So control everything.
So using the police and sort of state resources to monopolize drug trade in a certain area, is that correct?
Suppose drug trade was to be prohibited in the areas where militias dominate. But they kind of, for example, if you want to buy something, you have to buy from someone that is connected to the militias. For example, if you want to buy food, or if you want to buy anything in these neighbors, you have to be connected to militias. So everything you do, these neighbors, you have to pass through these militia organizations. So they dominate everything, every economic aspect. Even if you want to live there or to buy some place to live, you have to be authorized and give them money. So it's a kind of mafia, but a mafia that is mostly organized by corrupt members of the police, the army, and other security state forces.
Okay. So next thing I would like to ask you is, what is the current situation with COVID-19 and with coronavirus? Because as I understand, you have it a pretty tough situation over there. Well, what is it like now?
Yesterday was the tragic day. 600 deaths in 24 hours. That's the situation now. We don't know. That's the main problem. We don't know exactly what is happening because we have not sufficient resource to know how many people are infected, where are they infected. Bolsonaro is a kind of denier. I mean, he first denied that the virus was dangerous, or then he is now accusing all the governments, all the parts of the government to introduce this lockdowns was over exaggeration. So he's trying to seat mayors and other parts of government to stop the lockdowns and all other issues. So he's a kind of denier, and he's always in public, mobilizing his supporters. And so the federal government is not exactly acting properly the way that they should. And the minister for health issues, they want to renounce, and now another one is steps, and it's very problematic way to manage all the things. So the situation is very, very complicated.
And what I wanted to ask, is the situation worse because of poor state of Brazilian healthcare system? Is it, I don't know, poverty, or Because sort of Brazil stands out among the Southern American countries. Of course, it's a big country, so that would be expected that more people are sick, but in the sense that it is still growing, and spread of the virus has not been stopped in any way, and from what you are telling me, most probably it will not be stopped anytime soon.
Okay, we have a very interesting health system, in a sense that you have a public health system, so it doesn't really matter who you are or why you are, where you are. If you go to the public hospital, you're gonna find support. Of course, that's not perfect. Of course, many problems, but we have a federal healthcare system. So, and also we have a private possibility. So we have both systems work in Brazil: private one that you can pay, and a public one. And you can go to one or to another. If you have money, you can go to the private, or you go to the public. So we have a very interesting, very nice system. The thing is that they are not managed this system properly. The thing is that they took too long to step and to took the necessary measures in order to stop the virus to circulate. So if you think, we are not in a lockdown in São Paulo that it has 20 million people living there. So it's a kind of the quarantena that is almost a voluntary, or they try to convince people to stay home, but you have no impositions. So 40%, they say, of our population is in quarantine, but it's not an obligation to be. It's just a voluntary step that you have to do.
Is the, I don't know, school year or universities, are these closed? Do you conduct lectures via, I don't know, Zoom, Skype, or whatever, or do these work where you are stationed?
The schools and universities, they are closed until I think July 1st. They say that they will be closed, but the school system belongs to a state and not to the federal government. So São Paulo state gives some steps. So that's one difficult thing. Some states they offer possibilities better than others. So different areas of Brazil are in different situations now.
So because of the federal system, you have now unified ways of fighting against the spread of virus, correct?
We should have. But they are not managed properly the way they should do.
Okay. And I don't know, the final question or final topic. When I last time interviewed you in 2015, you had 3 books published. There will be links in the description for, general outline about these books. And as I understand, you have 2 more. As I understand, you continued work with archives of Brazilian secret police, and the book Mataram Alfonso's Marma. I don't know Portuguese, so my pronunciation is most probably bad. What is this book about?
So he was a Lithuanian immigrant, and he was a very important activist in Brazil. He was he was a communist activist in Brazil in the 30s, in the 40s. He was a very nice writer, and he organized newspapers and fight against the Getúlio Vargas dictatorship in the 30s and the 40s. and organize workers. He was a very, very good activist in this sense. But after the war, when the Communist Party was illegal again, and they were trying to organize strikes and all these things, and he was shot by the police, and he was murdered by the police. So this book is a biography. It's a small biography about how, from a very young immigrant, he became a very important militant, a very important activist in Brazil, and he works to Lithuanian newspapers, but also to Brazilian newspapers. So he like these two organizations that he used to manage. So it's a very interesting person.
I have just a more general question. So these original books are in Portuguese. Are there any, I don't know, plans or something like that to, at some point, to get them translated into Lithuanian?
No, unfortunately, it's not possible now. And I don't know, maybe in the future, or maybe a new book that is to Lithuanian audience, because we would have to change many things in order to explain issues about Brazil. And because when I write to Brazilian audience, I have to explain things about Lithuania that for a Lithuanian audience would be like obvious. And now this book that I published this year, it's about Baltic states. It's a general history about Baltic states in Portuguese. So I think it's one of the first books about Baltic states in Portuguese.
So there were no books in Portuguese about the history of Baltic states prior to your last book. Yes,
I think yes, but not. It's not. We don't used to write about Baltic states in Brazil. So in Brazil, I'm sure it's the first one, and in Portugal, I'm not sure.
I really doubt that. Well, at no point there were I don't know, a serious emigre community to Portugal. So I really doubt that there were any attempts at writing the history of Baltics or individual states. But I don't know. I don't know actually. Okay, so. And for any people who might be interested, I don't know, to learn Portuguese by using your books, is there a way to buy them online?
Yeah, it's possible to buy Amazon, or I think in Europe Amazon would be easier. And the website, the editor's website, also it's easy to find.
Okay. So I think we can wrap this up, this sort of short interview. I'm very glad that you have agreed to talk with me again, and it was very interesting with Bolsonaro and COVID and your books. And so thank you for your time, Erick, and I don't know, see you next time in like 4 years for you to present another 3 or 4 books that you will by the time have written.
Thank you. I hope not for years.
Pabaigai, norint išlaikyti kažkokią tai tradiciją, Frekenboko daina Bosanova.
paliesti lai toli. Ir net su pirštinė tokia daili ranka, jos noriu dar, aš noriu dar, aš noriu dar. Ar aš sapnuoju, ar narkozė gal neveikia, tikrai neskauda man ant gydytojo, landžiant manį. Pažintis retai kam pasitaiko.